Thanks for joining the show, guys. Looks like we have plenty of people in, so we're going to get started. If you're just now joining us, put it in the chat. Let us know where you're calling in from. Also, while you're in the chat, go ahead and change your settings from host and panelist to everyone. That way we can all see your messages. If you do host and panelists, we're not going to be able to see your messages. Also, I love doing shows when we get lots of Q&As. I join a lot of webinars myself, a lot of different shows. I always like to use that opportunity to ask questions directly to the people who I want to learn from. Tom is a great person to ask questions to. He has coached and worked with a lot of different reps across a lot of different industries. And so regardless of what industry you're in, I'm sure he has a lot of advice and tips for you. So put your questions in the Zoom bar because we're going to get to that towards the end of the show. But we've got a 30-minute show today, so we're going to get right to it. My name is Jed Marley. I'm the founder at Practical Prospecting. I'm here with Tom Alemo. He's the founder at TA Sales. Always happy to do shows with you, man. I love having you here. Welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Excited to jam out. Happy Friday.
Yeah, happy Friday. Happy Friday. Let us know in the chat, too, if you guys got any fun weekend plans. Always like hearing that as well as we continue to go through these intro slides. I want to say thank you to our partners, Aligned and Nooks, for making these shows possible. Again, thank you, Aligned and Nooks. Go check them out. I've used both of these tools. I'm currently an Aligned user. I don't do a ton of cold calling. If I did, I would use Nooks. It's a great tool for connecting with people much faster, having more live conversations. Real quick, if you didn't know, this is a daily sales show. So we have shows pretty much every single weekday. Go to the website to see our upcoming shows or our on-demand shows. Also, go to the YouTube channel where we have tons of short-form content on super tactical topics. So for today's agenda, we got 3 rough things we're going to be going through, but we're going to be talking about a lot of different stuff all around persistence, how to understand the fine line between being persistent and being annoying, something that we all struggle with as sales reps, strategies to create a follow-up cadence that adds value. Tom's going to share a cool nurture sequence that he has that I didn't actually see at all. So this is going to be brand new to me. And then overall, we're going to be talking about the psychology of timing. Also, I want to be clear, we're going to throw up a poll here. I want to know who is in the room. Are you an SDR, a closer, a manager? We're going to throw up a poll just to see who's in the room here. But we're going to focus today's show when it comes to persistence on the SDR side and the AE side. So both for cold leads and booking meetings and for mid-sale cycle closing deals, because both require persistence, but both require different types of persistence. And as people are filling out that poll, Tom, I want to start here because you shared this visual in the pre-call. I want to just start by asking, like, what do you see the importance of persistence being for sales reps? And what are your thoughts on being persistent versus, going across the line and essentially being annoying?
Yeah. So really important topic. There's 2 data points that I think should maybe frame the conversation. One is that, on this first one, I'm sorry, I don't know who to give the credit to on this, but I've seen that to reach a cold prospect, a lot of the data that we've used for the past few years has been around 8 touch points to reach someone cold. I've heard that it's referenced that it might be closer to 15 to 20 on average now. So it's twice as hard to reach prospects, right, that are completely cold because everyone's sending more emails. They're sending automated blasts. There's AI. There's less budget. People are all in their inbox, making cold calls on LinkedIn, doing all of these things, right? So it's harder to reach buyers. And the image here is actually some data that is time tested. And the data shows that in most industries, whether you're buying enterprise software, whether you're buying a car, whether you're buying sales training, whatever it is, about 3% of your qualified buyers are in market to buy right now, right? So we've got a little over 100 people on the phone right now. There's probably 3 to 6 people that might be in market for any of these things on average. 6% are open to it, but not actually like have a project maybe in a budget, but they're open to hearing your pitch. So most times when we're prospecting, we're trying to reach just that very small percentage. The average salesperson is reaching for that 3%. I make a cold call to Jed, or I send him a cold email, and if he's not in market for what I'm talking about right now, I throw him out in the trash, right? And the most elite salespeople are able to tap into this extra 91 to 97%, knowing that, all right, today is Jed ready to buy, insert product or service that I sell here? Maybe, maybe not. But how can I potentially nurture him and educate him and become more of a trusted advisor so that when the timing is right, I'm the first person that Jed thinks of, and my company is the first company that Jed thinks of when he's ready to make that purchase. That is the mindset shift from being just a sales rep to being a sales professional and actually like focused on the craft of how we do things. So I'm very passionate about the topic. I think it's an under represented part of what people talk about with sales. And I think a lot of us are leaving money and opportunities on the table by not hovering in on being professionally persistent without, just kind of being a pain in the butt or without just letting people fall off the wagon.
100%. First of all, I love this visual here, Tom, because I think one way to like tangibly know, am I being persistent enough? Is that, and I think everybody can relate to this. As an SDR, you're always going to run into these 3% people. It's those people where you send that first cold email and they say, hey, perfect timing, let's book a meeting. There's nothing wrong with that. That's good prospecting. You should be trying to capture as much of that 3 to 9% as you possibly can, because those people are out there. But the true test to like if you are persistent enough is how often can you capture these people? Not right away, but by reaching out to them and they say something like, hey, we already have a solution for this. We're not interested right now. And then are you then following up with them over the coming months and eventually turning this 90% into meetings? I think that's when you can truly say, yes, I'm being persistent enough. One other thing, and I wanted to ask you about this, Tom, I've seen that data as well, where it's like now it takes 15 to 20, maybe even more touch points to reach a prospect. That doesn't necessarily mean, at least in my opinion, that you should be doing those 20 touch points all within like a week or two. It doesn't mean you should be calling somebody nonstop all the time. This is just my opinion, but I'm curious to hear the chats and your opinion, Tom. I see that as I'm going to do some light touches that are more educational in the beginning, potentially. I'm doing cold calling, but I'm actually spreading it out over time, because when it comes to outbound, we're talking about top of funnel, it's all about timing. You can't always just convince this 90% that they need your product right now, but can you stay top of mind so that when that problem becomes big enough, they will then want to meet with you? But what are your thoughts on like what time period should you be doing those touch points in? And should you be doing it as more of a nurture or like more aggressive upfront?
Yeah, I would say it's actually I typically do both. So my first challenge when I'm trying to break into a new account or a new contact, and my biggest challenge is obscurity. People do not know that I exist. People do not know that my company exists in most cases. So in most sales sequences or cadences, that's why there's a lot of touches up front. You might have a triple touch on day one. You might have another call on day three, things like that. These are common approaches to try to break through the noise. Now, with that, I still might not get in touch with Jed because one, he just might not see my messages, or two, he might see them and say, I'm not in the market for that right now. So I'm not even going to really bother to respond. I'm not going to waste my time with that. So even though I might go through those first 10, 12 steps in the first month, that's where the nurture sequence comes into play. And I want to continue to educate him and play the long game. So that 20th touch might be after 10 months of reaching out. And that might be when, the timing is right.
Love that. Yeah. And I want to share real quick. I forgot to share the poll results here. Let me know if everyone can see that, but this is one of the first times I've seen a significant more number of AEs and SDRs, a lot of frontline managers and senior leadership. So thank you for joining the show, everybody. And always love seeing the SDRs, BDRs here. But because we have 45% of the audience here, account executives, Tom, we just talked a lot about prospecting. What are your thoughts on persistence as it relates to like in sales cycle? Like you've had that first call. What are your thoughts on like how to be persistent to move the deal along, but not annoy them to the point where they no longer want to work with you?
Yeah. So I think where the annoyingness comes in is when you and the prospect are on different pages and on different timelines. And usually this is just a matter of lack of communication. So to me, this comes back to how are we running discovery calls? So if I'm trying to sell Jed, my CRM or sales software, whatever I'm selling him, part of that first conversation, I want to get to a level of, quantifiable pain. I want to understand his business. I want to share a little bit about how we might be able to help. And I want to get a sense of where is this on his priority list and on his timelines. And it's on me as the salesperson to guide Jed, because I'm assuming Jed's maybe bought a few softwares before in his career or at his company, whereas I hopefully have sold this product many times and know this motion. And so I want to guide him and say, okay, cool. Just so we know, Jed, it sounds like this is, a top priority. You in theory, in your mind want to get this kicked off, in January. Here's what that process would look like. We typically run a demo. We, talk to your CFO, blah, blah, blah. Like, does that feel fair, or does that seem reasonable based on like, where you are and the time that you might want to be able to commit to this evaluation? And I want to just have that conversation, because he might just say, no, actually, I'm hiring 8 people right now, and that's, I got to get that done, and then let's look at this. Now we both just saved ourselves a lot of time, and we can reconnect when the timing's better, so I'm not chasing him. So I find early in the deal cycle, we want to understand that. And then each subsequent call, we know that things change. So even though Jed told me 2 weeks ago it was a top priority, maybe they just had a board meeting, things changed. I want to reevaluate and just say, hey, Jed, this is where we're at. What's changed on your end? On the timeline, you can create a mutual action plan together. There's all sorts of tactical things that we can do and we can dive more into. But I think most reps that I see are just maybe uncomfortable having that type of a conversation, when I think it ultimately helps you and it benefits the customer too, so that they don't want to feel like they're dragging you along, or they don't want to have to tell you to kick rocks after a month of ghosting you. It's easier just to have the conversation up front and tackle it head on.
I love that, man. Yeah, because I think, first of all, great answer. Like, I think the biggest thing you mentioned there was it all comes down to communication. Like, knowing what their critical events are, for example, allow you to kind of match up how persistent you should be. If you don't know, like, specifically why it's urgent for them to be looking at your software and what urgent problems they're trying to solve, it's really hard to like be persistent in the right way. For example, like, let's say I'm selling sales training and I know that this company has a sales kickoff in January of next year. It makes sense for me to be persistent and mention like, hey, following up with you because I know you wanted to get this done in time before your sales kickoff in January. Like, having that critical event helps you just have a better reason for following up and being persistent, as opposed to just kind of being left in the dark there. But yeah, those are all really good things. And I want to segue this into what you call the Stovetop sequence, because one of the big things with being persistent, again, is following up. And one of the big issues I see that I've done myself and being on the receiving end of sales calls is that people will follow up and it's very generic. It's like, hey, any thoughts on this? Or when can we meet next? There's really no value in the sales outreach. And the issue is that most of our buyers now, especially if you're selling SaaS or software, most of the time they're talking to 5+ other sales reps. And so you're really not standing out at all if you're not including any sort of value in your follow-up. So talk to us, Tom, about this Stovetop sequence. I have no idea what this tomato means, but apparently it means something. And I think you're going to share your screen too, so I can stop sharing as well if you want me to.
Yeah. And I think we added some of the images to a slide. So I think it'll be on the net. Yeah,
oh, yeah,
2 slides from now. So we can go back.
Sweet.
We can go back for now to the Stovetop. So let's just get to why I call it this. So I'm Italian. In the Italian culture, traditionally speaking, on Sunday you got the Sunday sauce, right? So grandma's working on the stove. It's a simmer. It's making the house smell good. It's bubbling up for 8-10 hours, and it's just a beautiful thing, Jed. I don't know if you ever experienced this. And so most of us in our sales process, we're trying to get microwave deals, right? We're trying to get this done in a minute and 30 seconds, like we're making popcorn, right? When sometimes it's more of a slow simmer because of all the things that we talked about earlier. So that's really just my kind of silly way of saying that I find a lot of value out of a nurture sequence. This was one of the top ways that I sold when I was at a company called Tech Target, when I was at Gong, and in the last 2 years of running my own business. And what this means tactically is that for anyone, I typically do this for people that I've had some sort of interaction with, right? So a no-show, a close loss deal, someone that ghosted me, someone that churned, someone that, is not a customer, but we've had some sort of interaction before. Once a month, every 3 to 4 weeks, I'm going to make contact with them, right? And I'm not going to say, hey, Jed, I'm checking in, or hey, Jed, want to chat on Friday. I am, 95% of the time just trying to send them something that might be interesting to them, right? So I might send, I do a lot of content. I might send them an upcoming webinar. I might say, hey, I'm going to be on the Sell Better show next week, or I was just on the Sell Better show, check the recording. I thought it might be helpful for what you're doing with your sales team, or something that's not related to me. Here's a report that Salesforce put out about sales and mental health. Thought it might be interesting for you to check out for your team, right? And no ask. And so what I'm doing there is making deposits. And over time, when I do this for the first month, nothing happens. The second month, nothing happens. By month 3, 6, 12, the people start to compound. And you'd be very surprised how often someone responds to that and says, it's so funny. We just had a big team meeting and we're looking to evaluate X, or we just laid someone off, or someone just quit. We need help. Can you get on a call tomorrow? And what I'm doing is playing the long game with these folks and hoping to transform in their mind that I'm not just a salesperson with a product, but I'm actually someone that cares about their business and actually knows what I'm talking about in the market, whatever market that I'm in. And that separates me from just the other person that's just cold calling them, asking for a meeting every single time. So that's my way of playing the long game.
I love it, man. I want to share, I think we have examples that you're going to share in just a moment, but I want to also share from my own personal experience because, first of all, that's one of the best sales analogies I've heard in recent time, the Stovetop Sequence versus like microwave. I think that makes total sense, and I understand the tomato now. I do something similar, and I've seen a lot of people do similar things as well, where it's like, what I did is I'm also selling essentially consulting, done for you outbound as a service. And what I did recently was pretty much build like a 10-page document that explains everything that we do for clients in extreme detail. And what I do now is whenever I have a closed loss deal or somebody, like you mentioned, the no shows, et cetera, I'll then follow up a month later and send this document to them. But I think the key difference, and let's say you work at a SaaS company. Another good example is like you had a new product release. You can send that as an update, or you have a new ebook that your company put out, a new blog post, or it doesn't even have to be from your company, right? Sharing resources is great. Sharing something new is great. But I think the key difference between good and great salespeople is tying that into a previous conversation you had with them. So let's say you have a new product release. Don't just say like, hey, it's been a while since we talked. I wanted to share this exciting new update. We have a new product release. Let me know your thoughts. Say like, hey, we just released a new, so-and-so a new product or feature. It had me thinking about our conversation when you mentioned X, Y, and Z was important. So that's why I thought this would be interesting. So like the key difference is explain why you think that's relevant to them. Don't just share the resource. And I think it's a big difference. But Tom, any thoughts on that, or do you want to get to your examples?
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. And depending on your familiarity with that person, like if you got to the end of a deal cycle, if you're an AE here or an AM and you lost a deal, hopefully you've got a lot of information you've gotten on calls. You can go back to your recordings, things like that, and you can say, hey, I remember you talked about XYZ. And so definitely include the context. If it's someone that no-showed or is a former inbound or something like that, you could go and do a little company research and just see what's happening in their world. And so like there's always something that you can find, and just even including a sentence in there, again, adds to the separation. And I think it's the consistency. Like, again, if you just do this once, it might not do anything. But if they see that you just keep doing it over and over and over again, they're like, wow, this person's built different. Like, let's at least give them a shot. When it's the time, like let's at least let's hear them out on what they have to say.
Yeah, 100%. And guys, just a quick warning, we've got 10, 11 minutes left, so we're going to get into Q&A in a little bit. I see we already have 4 questions, but feel free to drop your questions there in Q&A so we can get to them by the end of this call. But Tom, we have a few examples here, so if you want to, let's talk through these, and then we'll get to this slide, and we'll go into Q&A as well.
Yep. Yeah. So this is just an example of I might send. So like I sent this to a team. We had a conversation about them bringing on someone for sales training. That project ended up getting pushed. Like I mentioned, I run webinars and things like that as a way of doing marketing. Perhaps your company does that, or road shows. So this is just a very generic kind of message that I sent out. Hey, here's an invite. Here's some more free content that I'm posting on LinkedIn, podcasts, YouTube. I'm trying to just, get them deeper into the funnel, so to speak, get them more and more comfortable. And then if we go to the next slide, again, I'm doing this to dozens, at this point, over 100 people consistently that I've met in my last few years of working with sales leaders. This is someone that ended up joining one of those. And she said, hey, really, really enjoyed the webinar, blah, blah, blah. And nothing really happened from that. This was about a year ago. And then if we go to the next slide, I think there should be one more image. I got married recently, so you can see kind of the timeliness here. I had checked back in with her. And then boom, a lot had happened at their company. They had some change and some turnover and things like that. And now we have an active opportunity that I would label as probably a best case for Q4 and maybe most likely for Q1 for the AEs out there. So I've got a legit opportunity at the executive level with this company. Now, would they have hit me up if I didn't talk to them for a year and I just had left a really good impression from our first sales call? Maybe. There's no way for me to know that, but it certainly didn't hurt that I was continuously trying to send them quality content, get them back into the funnel, continue to re-engage them. And it's not 100% hit rate, but it doesn't. The beauty of this is that it doesn't take a lot of effort. Your company probably already has things that are getting pumped out. You probably see podcasts or industry reports from Gartner or whatever it might be for your industry. And so it doesn't take a lot of effort to send these out once a month, and the impact can really help you out.
Yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer. I like these. Again, this is super simple. You can send this to a bunch of people. You probably just block off an hour or two every month to send these out. Yeah, I mean, this is great. It's kind of a no-brainer. So, guys, take a moment to screenshot these if you want to. We're also going to send the recording. I saw a few people ask. The recording will always be available if you go to sellbetter.xyz and then click on the on-demand calls. You'll be able to see all of the recordings and the resources that we share. We've got 8 minutes left, and I see 7 questions. So let's go through this real quick, Tom. And we don't have to go through everything, but guys, these are just more so 10 ideas of how to think about persistence and things that are important when it comes to being persistent versus being annoying, for example. We talked about a lot of these things, but a few things. Actually, there was one that I wanted to touch on. I'm just pulling it up real quick. Using social proof to keep prospects engaged as well. And the reason why I wanted to talk about that was, Tom, you shared your example of following up with resources every month. Another good thing you can do is if you close another customer that's like similar to them or had a similar problem in a similar industry, you can follow up. And this is something that I do a lot, which is just saying like, hey, I just worked with so-and-so company. They reminded me of you in X, Y, and Z ways. Just wanted to follow up and see if you guys had made any progress in solving this problem. So social proof is another way that I wanted to touch on because we haven't talked about it yet in terms of how to be persistent. But Tom, anything in here jump out at you or anything you want to kind of double down on of these 10 ideas?
Yeah, no, I love the social proof idea. I think the key is not to go to a small startup and say, hey, here's what we're doing for Coca-Cola. So make sure that it's aligned. That can actually do more harm than good, I think.
Yeah.
So make sure it's aligned, make sure the problems are aligned that they might have faced, and you can tell that story. I think number 10 is interesting of just knowing when to stop. So I think the nurture sequence, like for me, the Stovetop, I plan to be in this game for a long time. I'm going to run that for eternity, and keep playing the long game with people. Now, when we're pushing on an active deal, I think there's a diminishing return. If you've been ghosted for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, and you've sent a number of messages and made calls and tried different channels and there's nothing back, I might throw one Hail Mary and just kind of put my cards on the table and say, hey, Jed, I haven't heard from you in a month. I imagine that this has gotten put to the back burner. I'm gonna kind of like take a step back. Let me know if I'm off the base here, and trying to chase those deals can just be a big waste of energy and time. So I think learning when to cut and being transparent about that is important.
100%. Yep. Cool. And guys, again, you'll have that recording so you can go back to everything we just shared there. Love it. So thank you. We got 8 questions here. Let's go into it. First one from Amanda. Will you be sharing the deck after this call? Yep. You will be getting the recording. So knock that one out. Next question from Jessica. Do you reach out persistently if they never respond? Also, are you nurturing nothing if you continue to touch? I'm not sure I understand the second part of that question.
I think what she's getting at is like, is it worth nurturing someone if they haven't given you a response before? And so the Stovetop sequence for me is people that I've actually had an interaction with. So if I put you, Jessica, into a sales sequence, do my 12 touches, you never get back to me, I'm not going to just like keep going once a month with you forever. What I might do though, if I think you're a good prospect, is probably like let you chill for a little bit, and then maybe 3 months later or 6 months later, could put you back in a higher touch sequence and try to get into assume that maybe it's better timing, or try to get a response that way. So that's what I would personally do.
Love it. We got another question from Josh, and I'm just going through these quick because we got six more. But a
Yep.
question from Josh: what are your strategies? I like this a lot, actually. What are your strategies for layering nurturing from sales on top of nurturing from marketing? Or just thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you should be using as salespeople the long term game. We're kind of mini marketers in a way. So yes, if you have marketing help where they're running events and webinars and things like that, that's great. But we've got to take that on ourselves because they're not probably going to customize things. They don't probably know what's going on at your customers' pain points and things like that. So what I would do tactically is I would say, hey, Jed, marketing sent me this thing about a dinner that we're running for CEOs in San Diego next month. I would take that. I would send it personally to Jed, and I'd make a call and say, hey, this is what we're doing. I thought of you because of X. Are you interested in going? So it's putting in that extra effort to get them to that marketing event that can help kind of bring them down the funnel.
Love it. Yeah, that's a great answer. Next question from Carol. When you get in a stride over time, it is easier to have this mentality and adopt this type of sale. How do you balance that when you are new to your sales role and need to turn that microwave deal? So,
It's tough. Yeah. I mean, you want to, depending on your role, you might have longer or shorter deal cycles. I think some of the stuff we're talking about here takes time, and there's nothing, like you can't change someone's timing. So early in a role, you're probably spending 90 to 95% of your time going for the top 3% on that pyramid because that's how you need to start hitting numbers quickly. And then a percentage of your time is spent on the long game. And over time, depending on your role, of course, you're probably going to see that ratio start to shift, and you might be playing more of the long game and have to rely less on those quick hitting deals. But yeah, if you're new to a gig, you got to probably get some numbers in quick to show that you're a good hire and, off to a good start.
yeah, it's a tough question. I mean, it's like it's only for the short term, but yeah, it is. Yeah, it's tough in the first several months. The strategy is a little bit different. We've got 2 more minutes. These next two questions are pretty similar, so I'm kind of going to ask you them both at the same time, Tom. So first one from Samantha, thoughts on re-engaging prospects in the same email campaign if there is no engagement in the initial round? And then the next question from Josh is very similar. Are you threading these nurture/value emails for the long game, or are you doing a new thread every time? So I think the question is like, are you just going back to those same emails and following up there, or are you sending new threads every time?
Yeah, for someone that is in the nurture sequence, that if we have a back and forth, I might respond to a response they gave me. But if I'm just pumping, content without a response for 3 or 6 months, then I'm going to do new threads because I don't want to see them. I don't like the look of me sending a bunch of stuff and them psychologically seeing they don't respond, and that's how they react. So I try to play on that when I can. For the first question, if I bring someone back and recycle them into a sequence, I would try a different approach than rather than just like put them in the same exact sequence 3 months later, 6 months later.
Yeah, 100%. I apologize. I see there's 3 questions that we didn't get to, but we are at 12:30. So what I will say is the people who had questions and anybody else, we're going to put Tom's LinkedIn in the chat here. Go connect with Tom.
Yeah.
Go follow me. It's great content. And yeah, Tom, anything else to add for the audience here? Thanks again. I mean, this was awesome. Lots of good stuff. And I love the analogies as well.
Yeah, man. It's always a blast coming on with you. 30 minutes is never enough. Definitely encourage everyone to DM me, connect with me on LinkedIn. If you have other questions, I'm happy to chat, happy to answer them. And I'll be back for another show, I think, next week with Sell Better.
Yeah.
So there's my subtle plug for that. I'm excited for that too.
Love it. Thanks again, man. See you guys. Have a great weekend.
All right. See you, everyone.